Mary Cooper hid university letters in her nightstand, rewrote her dead husband's entire personality, and used baptism as a grief coping mechanism. And for years, the show asked you to root for her. Mary Cooper is not a villain the way TV usually builds one. She doesn't manipulate because she enjoys it. She genuinely, completely believes she is the most righteous person in every room she walks into. And that is exactly what makes her dangerous. A person who knows they're wrong can change. Mary Cooper has never known that. And by the time the show ends, she never figures it out. Let's start at the beginning. Not the beginning of young Sheldon, the beginning of Mary Cooper's entire psychology. Because you cannot understand what she becomes without understanding what she was before. Mary was a teenager who drank, smoked, snuck out, did everything she later told her children would send them straight to hell. And then the twins were born. Missy nearly died during delivery. It was terrifying and sudden, and Mary panicked the way people do when they come face to face with something completely outside their control. She made a deal. She told God that if Missy survived, she would change her entire life. Missy survived, and Mary paid up. Here's what's important about that. Her faith was never about grace. It was a transaction. God kept his end, so Mary keeps hers. She follows the rules. She goes to church. She raises her kids inside the lines, and in return, she gets the safety, the guarantee that the universe will not take anything else from her. That is a fundamentally unstable foundation to build a life on. Because what happens when the universe takes something anyway? But that's later. First, the letters. At some point in young Sheldon, Mary discovers that universities, including Caltech, Princeton, and programs in Germany, are actively recruiting her 9-year-old son. These are not junk mail. These are institutions reaching out about a child who could genuinely change the trajectory of human knowledge. And Mary takes those letters and puts them in her nightstand and says nothing. Think about what that actually means. She is not protecting Sheldon from information he couldn't handle. She's protecting herself from a conversation she doesn't want to have. Because if Sheldon knows universities are chasing him, he leaves sooner. The house empties sooner. So she hides the letters and tells herself it's because he's too young, because it's not the right time, because God has a plan. She eventually lets him go, but she controlled the timeline. She made that call unilaterally for herself and dressed it up as maternal instinct. Now here's what makes this more complicated and not less disturbing. Mary genuinely loves Sheldon. That's not in question. The issue is that her love for him is also the most convenient love she's ever had, because Sheldon's success reflects back on her. He is her proof. Her proof that the deal was worth it, that her strictness and sacrifice produced something extraordinary. Sheldon winning the Nobel Prize is not just his achievement. In Mary's interior life, it is hers. She built the container. She protected the genius. She stayed. And that makes what she does to the other two kids so much uglier. Because Georgie and Missy don't produce the same reflection. Georgie holds the family together after George dies. He stays in Medford when he had every reason to leave. He takes care of a grieving mother, a spiraling sister, a newborn daughter, and a small business he bought using his family's house as collateral, all before he's 20. And Mary's response across both shows is to describe him as not the sharpest tool in the shed and let Sheldon tell his friends in California for decades that his brother is essentially a moron. She never corrects it. She never says, "Actually, while you were building your career, your brother was keeping the lights on." That story doesn't serve her, so she lets it disappear. And Missy. If you want to understand what Mary Cooper actually prioritizes, look at the Professor Proton photo scene. Missy has been crying for hours. First heartbreak, the kind that hits hard at 11. Sheldon barges into her room and starts antagonizing her because Sheldon does not register that other people's suffering has weight. She snaps. She rips a signed photograph off the wall. Mary walks in, sees a crying Sheldon, sees torn paper, and grounds Missy without asking a single question about why her daughter has been in tears all afternoon. A torn photograph was more urgent than a heartbroken child. Mary doesn't even notice the contradiction. That is not a bad day. That is a value system. But the thing that changes Mary from a complicated mother into something genuinely darker is George's death, because that's where she crosses a line she never comes back from. George Cooper Sr. was not the man Mary describes in The Big Bang Theory. He liked his beer. He had a moment with the neighbor that went close to a line he didn't cross. He was imperfect, but he also turned down his dream job in Tulsa because Mary made it impossible for him to leave. He worked without complaint. He loved his family in the quiet, unglamorous way that never gets plaques or speeches. Mary tells Sheldon's friends in Pasadena that George was a lazy drunk who cheated on her, casually, like it's just one of those things about her life. He didn't cheat. The famous scene, the one Sheldon says gave him his triple knock habit, where he supposedly walked in on his father with another woman. Young Sheldon reveals it was Mary in a blonde wig. She and George were trying something to keep their marriage alive. Sheldon didn't recognize his own mother. He never asked, they never talked about it, and Mary never found out what her son believed he saw. So when she tells people George cheated, she's not repeating something she witnessed. She's repeating a story she built out of guilt and grief, and the desperate need to be the righteous one. If George was terrible, losing him is survivable. If he was a good man she failed, it isn't. She constructed a version of her husband, and then she grieved that version. The real one she buried without ever saying sorry. Then comes the baptism scene. Weeks after George dies, Mary demands Sheldon and Missy be baptized immediately. She's crying, frantic, telling them she cannot sleep until she knows their souls are safe. And here is the part that makes this theologically extraordinary in the worst possible way. Mary is a Southern Baptist. She knows the doctrine. Believer's baptism. It has to be voluntary. A forced baptism in her own tradition is literally meaningless. She knows this. And she does not care, because she's not doing it for God. She needs a ritual. She needs to feel like she did something to stop the free fall. Sheldon agrees because he loves her and cannot watch her suffer. He wears a wetsuit to avoid the germs. Missy refuses and runs out of the church alone, and Mary takes Sheldon's compliance as proof that her approach works. A genuine act of love from her son gets processed as divine confirmation that forcing people is effective. That is the moment the complicated woman from the early seasons calcifies into something else entirely. After that, everyone scatters. Mima assumes the religious intensity is temporary grief and moves in with Dale. Sheldon leaves for Caltech. Georgie builds his own life. Missy pulls every door shut, and Mary is left alone in that house with nobody to challenge her worldview. The church becomes her only community. God becomes her only conversation partner. And over years of that isolation, the woman who once took in a pregnant stranger because it was the right thing to do, hardens into someone who mocks other people's religions without blinking, who tells a grieving daughter to go to her room when she should be holding her, who excuses everything Sheldon ever did and forgives nothing Missy ever needed forgiveness for. She had every chance to heal. She chose the version of faith that punishes instead of the one that forgives. And the most heartbreaking part is she genuinely thought she was the good guy the entire time. She had the verse to prove it. She had the prayer to prove it. She had a dead husband she'd quietly turned into a monster, and a genius son she'd quietly turned into her entire identity, and she called that righteousness. Mary Cooper isn't dark because she's cruel. She's dark because she never once stopped to ask whether any of it was true.